Hello and welcome everybody who's joining us tonight for our Fall Sports Information Night. This is an exciting time, the fact that we get to discuss the beginning of fall athletics. I'd like to start off by first introducing everybody who's joining us tonight in our Zoom meeting. First, we have Kim Murray, who is our girls faculty athletic manager with Shaker Athletic Department. We have Greg Sheeler, who is our boys faculty athletic manager. And as many of you know, we have Mr. Kaur, our superintendent. And I'm going to let Mr. Kaur start us off with a few comments, and then we'll get started with our presentation.
Thank you, Coach Stein. This is a wonderful evening, and this is an opportunity for us to announce officially the beginning of our fall sports season, as we are going to be playing our schedule of sports that have been approved by the New York State Public High School Athletic Association. I know I believe, and I know everyone on this call believes in the power of athletics to inspire our students, to offer them another avenue by which to learn, by which to gain the skills of citizenship and working together. And the lessons of athletics are wonderful, important, and lifelong. And we're grateful to be able to present to our community this evening a program that we believe will be safe, will provide wonderful opportunities for our students to compete and to learn and grow as they compete with one another, as they compete with other schools, and as they learn from each other and learn, very importantly, from their coaches. So it gives me great pleasure to open this night, and I would like community to turn it over to our athletic department staff to begin the program. Thank you all very much for your hard work.
Thank you, Mr. Kaur. We appreciate you, your support in getting the fall athletic program off the ground. Many of you who are watching tonight may not know, but I know that athletics have been an important part of Mr. Kaur's life. When he was a teacher, he's a former coach involved in our athletic programs, and we thank him for his support. So I am going to get started here by sharing our presentation. I'm going to ask that our group, if you can give me a wave if it looks like our presentation up and we're ready to go. Thank you. So first and foremost, I want to let everybody know that we appreciate the questions that you had sent in to us ahead of time. I want to let you know that many of the questions are going to be answered throughout the presentation, and then the ones that aren't, we're going to address at the very end. So thank you for sending those to us. To get started, we wanted to talk a little bit about our goals for the fall season. Of course, and this speaks to what Mr. Kaur had just mentioned, and that is we want to provide a positive experience for our student athletes. That's always the case here at North Colony, is that experience of teamwork, of camaraderie, of hard work, dedication to our programs, to our student athletes and their teammates, and of course to have that be able to give that opportunity again this fall is critical. And of course it's important, and I can speak as a parent myself who has three children in school here at North Colony, that there's that sense of normalcy. And I think as athletic parents, you know that sense of normalcy comes from just practicing every day, competing once or twice a week. That's important. That's something that's been tough to achieve during the last 6 or 7 months. So that's something that we look forward to doing. Of course, we want to adhere to safety guidelines. These are things that we're going to touch upon later on in our program tonight, and we'll get into some of the specifics of those safety guidelines. And of course, we want to conduct a safe season. We want to hopefully be able to get through our entire season. We know that there could be challenges with that, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But those are really our initial goals for our fall season. I'm going to take just a quick break and let everyone know that we are not going to be speaking about any individual sports tonight except for our golf program. I want everybody to know that if you're not involved in our golf program, that is the one sport that things happen very aggressively. There's a few days of tryouts and they're right into matches. And so for the sake of how everything has happened so quickly, my golf coaches, both boys and girls, have asked me to just let you know, for those of you out there tonight that are looking to be involved in our golf program, that please be aware you need to check your emails, this Friday for a mandatory meeting that's going to happen because they want to get information out for what's going to happen over the next or for the first few days next week. They're going to cover tryouts, bus information to get to the course, and all of the first week details. And really, they begin competitions next Thursday. So they know that they need to get to everybody quickly. So again, that's going to be the only specific sport we mentioned tonight. I wanted to put it at the beginning and get it out there while we have everybody's full attention. And please be on the lookout if you're signed up for boys and girls golf for some information coming by Friday. So that being said, moving on to the rest of our sports, as you can see on your screen, these are going to be our fall offerings this year. These offerings were determined by the New York State Public High School Athletic Association to be the sports that they deemed most safe to offer. That was also decided by our governor in a press conference about a month ago. These are what are considered moderate to low risk sports. As you can see, we have boys and girls cross country, boys and girls soccer, field hockey, girls tennis, boys and girls golf, and varsity swimming. Now, diving, unfortunately, is not going to be a part of our swimming program this year. For those of you who have been a part of our swim program, you know that diving is something that takes place off campus, and those opportunities, just due to COVID, are not available this year. We are not able to get onto college campuses. They have things locked down pretty tight, as you can imagine. If you follow in the media, they're keeping things as safe as they possibly can for their students. And just getting into another high school at this time isn't possible because everybody's trying to keep their cohorts as safe as possible on a regular basis. So unfortunately, diving can't be part of our program this year, but we most certainly hope and look to bring that back in the near future. Just in regards to our high-risk sports that are traditionally in the fall, that's football, cheerleading, and volleyball. They have been moved to what's being called Fall Season 2. That's the term that is being used across the state, which is going to begin on March 1st. Athletes are eligible to participate in 4 seasons this year. So you can choose to play a fall sport beginning next week, be involved in a winter sport, and then you may play a sport in Fall Season 2, which would be football, cheer, or volleyball. And then, of course, in our spring season, that'll occur after that. And we will touch a little bit on Fall Season 2 and spring at the very end because we did get some questions about that. I just didn't want to mix that up with the discussion regarding our fall sports today. So moving on to our modified sports. This, unfortunately, is going to be an area where the Suburban Council as a whole is not going to be able to offer a program this year. Simply said that the challenge to offer a modified program was great, and there were a number of reasons why it was a challenge for all 15 of our schools in the Suburban Council. A major challenge is transportation. We have many contests that go out on a daily basis in a number of the schools, and a challenge for us as well is simply having enough buses to get our athletes to away contests on a daily basis. But another challenge is logistics. Some schools like us are having different start and end times for their middle schools, and that was a challenge. And then we had some schools in the league that it's a budget concern. As you may or might not know, following in the newspapers and in the media, that a couple of our schools in the league are facing major budget challenges. But at the end, all of these put together made the difficult decision for the schools in our league to say that we cannot provide schedules for our modified 9, and our freshman levels for this fall. Okay, this is just a fall decision at this time. It is not a decision for the entire year and for every season, and we'll take these decisions one season at a time. I will say that we are working extremely hard in the Shaker Athletic office to try and find ways that we can provide opportunities for our 7th and 8th grade athletes. We're exploring possibilities down the road where we may be able to offer some intramural programming and some activities that can get our students involved. We're working very hard to find solutions to that. So hopefully, if we can create some opportunities, we most certainly are going to share them with you and the community about how we can make that happen. Okay, moving on to our APP or athletic placement process, I'm going to hand this over to Coach Sheeler.
Welcome, everyone. So excited for next week and start working with our kids out in the fields again. I'm going to be talking about the APP process, which for those who don't know, is a process in which our middle school athletes are eligible to play at the high school level. At this time as a district, we've made the decision for the fall season to not APP new athletes to the process. All right. The athletes that we will consider to be eligible are the ones that were APP last fall as 7th graders in the same sport in which they're going to be playing this year as 8th graders. All right. Those athletes will be grandfathered in. All right. The decision not to APP new athletes is a very difficult one, and it's been made from purely a health and safety standpoint. We're really trying to maintain the integrity of our established cohorts within our schools. So we're trying not to mix as much as we can. So obviously it's a tough decision, but it's something that we felt is in best interest. A couple examples, last year as a 7th grade tennis player who played JV last fall in 2019, she would be eligible to play again as an 8th grader at the JV level for tennis. All right, in a similar situation, a 7th grade athlete who played JV softball in the spring would not be eligible to play soccer in the fall because it's a different season and different. So that's the APP decision for the fall. And like Mr. Stein had mentioned, we'll make another decision as the winter and spring gets closer and make sure we get that information out.
And before we hand our next slide off to Ms. Murray, I would just like to follow up on one comment that you mentioned, Coach Sheeler, and that is a big part of our decision did come from that cohorting process. And for people to understand where we're coming from on that, from a health and safety standpoint, our junior high students come at a different time of day, and they are considered a cohort. If you're a parent of a junior high student, you also know that we have various cohorts within our 7th and 8th graders that come to school in the in the hybrid model. So we are really working to avoid as much crossover between junior high cohort, junior high students mixed in with our high school students for obvious reasons as it relates to COVID and managing that. So by just grandfathering those students who were APP approved in a fall sport last year, it's going to amount to an extremely, extremely small number of student athletes. We're talking less than 5 total. And we felt that that was a small enough number that we were comfortable with, but at the same time, we felt that that was fair that those students who had the opportunity to come up last year as 7th graders to continue on in their experience in that sport. So I would like to move on and hand the next slide over to Coach Murray.
Thanks, Matt. So Family ID has been used by other districts locally for a while now, and it is supported by the Capital Region BOCES. Basically, it is a convenient, user-friendly online platform for registering our student athletes, and more specifically for our district, it's serving as a replacement for those of you who have done it before, for our recheck forms that we used to require. Students came to the nurse's office in person and delivered their recheck forms. So now we've alleviated that, we've eliminated that process, and basically students can do this online. Parents are filling out the registration forms. I know one of the questions that was asked when we announced this meeting was whether Family ID was equipped with multi-factor authorization. And I did look into that. So I'm just going to answer that question now. I know we will get to questions later on, but that one was pertaining to Family ID. And it is not currently utilized, but it is part of the plan for future development with Family ID. So what I thought I'd do is, Matt, if you wouldn't mind going to the district website, I figured I could just walk parents through what they should expect to see and do. So right on the district website, if you go to the athletics page, and you're going to see Family ID right there at the top, where it says learn more about Family ID and the registration process. If you click on that, it is going to tell you right at the top what information you need to know before you start registering. And then it walks you through all the different steps of the registration process. Expect that the first time through, it may take about 15, 20 minutes. Family ID does remember your information. So if you sign up for a different sport in a different season, a lot of that information will carry over. If you sign up for the same sport the next year, again, a lot of that information will carry over. So it is a streamlined process. And again, it alleviates that in-person speaking to the nurse to get rechecked. So for safety concerns, this is definitely the way to go. And again, the fact that the Capital Region BOCES has backed this up, we feel very comfortable with the security of this. So from here, all you would need to do is click on the Family ID button. Matt, I don't know if you want to click on that. Yep. And it's a little slow, but it's going to take you, yep, right there. Right to the Family ID platform, right to our page, Shaker Athletics. And you would just click on JV and varsity. Matt, you don't have to do that here, but as soon as you click on the JV and varsity, it's going to give you the options of all the fall sports we're now offering. And from there, you're going to fill in your information and hit the submit button, and you should be all set. And then the nurses can review the information and process it, let you know if there's any errors or any issues. And that's about it.
So as many of our families are aware that for this season, there has been an extension granted by New York State Education Department where updated physicals are not needed if we have a physical on file for a student dating back to the school year of 2018 and 19. So many of our families who have already registered, and I believe we're probably somewhere in the 250 to 300 range as far as families that have used Family ID to sign up for this fall. Many of you haven't had to worry about the physical component because you know of that extension. But what is nice about Family ID is in the future when those physicals are needed, you're going to be able to scan them and upload them right into Family ID. There will not be a need for you to drop those in the mail or have your child bring them into the health office. It really is as simple as you can take a picture of your documents with your phone, save them and upload them to Family ID as such. And one other function that's useful, we have many families that have to give updated doctor's orders before the school year starts, and they do relate to the fall season. So if it's involving an inhaler or an EpiPen and you have that paperwork, that also can be scanned and uploaded as well, all from the comfort of your home or not worrying about delivering or mailing those items into school. Ms. Murray, anything else with Family ID?
No, I think you covered it.
Okay, thank you. So health and safety, a lot of good information that we're going to cover here. I am going to say that before we cover some health and safety items, you're going to see at the end of our presentation that there are some links for really in-depth documents and guidance and how we developed our health and safety guidelines. So those will be coming later for you to see. And as always with our presentations here that we do stream over YouTube, this presentation, you're going to be able to follow the link and watch anytime after today as well. So for health and safety, daily attestations are a part of being a part of our athletic program, just like they are being a part of our in-person portion of our academic day. So for example, if you are a student that came to school the day of practice, you had to attest to come to school, your attestation is complete. You do not need to do another one before stepping onto the practice or game field. If you are a student who is a home on the hybrid model that day, or you are an all virtual student and you are not in school that day, you will need to complete an attestation before you can step onto the field or into the pool. Our coaches will be checking before you can be involved and making sure that that is completed. So please keep that in mind. We have a number of guidelines that we need to follow for this fall. Too many to talk about in one sports information night, but as I mentioned before, the complete guidelines are going to be there for you to follow. First and foremost, the New York State Public High School Athletic Association has released guidelines and guidance to follow for a safe and healthy fall season. We are following, and by we, I not only mean the North Colony School District, but the Suburban Council as a whole are following the NISFA guidelines. And on top of it, there are instances where our North Colony guidelines may even add another layer to the state guidelines to just ensure safety. So those documents are available for you to look at any time, and we'll share those links later. Masks. And masks is going to be a big part of our competition this fall. If you are to read the NISPA guidance, masks are required in athletics. And if you read, it says masks are required as tolerated. It is important for parents to know, and we have shared this with our coaches. And of course, we will be reminding our student athletes on a daily basis as they work through the new normal here with sports and wearing a mask, that as tolerated means that if you need to remove your mask, it must be done in a safe fashion. Meaning if you must remove it, you must remove yourself from proximity of other athletes or coaches or managers who may be on the field. That is game field, that is practice field. We are going to be providing mask breaks, but we also prescribe to the notion of the self-regulated mask break, okay? And let me just say that again, the term self-regulated mask break. That means, for example, let's say I am in a soccer game, playing a game against Shenandoah, and I feel my mask needs to come down. There's a couple ways that can happen safely. It could be that I am on defense, the ball's at the other end of the field, I can safely be away, which is more than 6 feet from another athlete, and I may take my mask down. If the ball's coming back and I feel I need to make a play, my mask would need to go back up. The second way that can happen is simply pulling yourself out of the situation. We are going to be telling our student athletes, if their mask needs to come down, if they need a self-regulated mask break, that they have the ability to do that anytime they need, regardless of the impact that it may have on the contest, period. That is an initiative that is coming, it has gone down directly to all our coaches from this athletic office and from the Suburban Council, that safety is first. And that means masks are required during practice and play. And if a break is needed, an athlete should pull themselves away from others in action to give themselves one if they so need. Okay. Equipment disinfecting is a part of our safety plan, and we have a number of ways to do that. First and foremost, for some sports and activities, very little to no equipment sharing is possible. And for others, some is going to be needed. So we will disinfect our equipment every single day. For some, that's using spray and wipes. And for others, it's going to be using our fogger machines. And we have a number of them that are possible for our coaches to use on a daily basis. We have 4 just in our athletic and phys ed department alone that every single day a coach needs to disinfect and fog. It's a great system to use because you can really, really disinfect and cover all of the surfaces of your equipment effectively. It dries and it's ready to use the next day. It could even be used in the middle of practice. 2 sets of equipment could exist. Some of it can be fogged while we get the other set and then break it back out 15 to 30 minutes later. So they're really convenient, and we have plenty of them to use to make sure that our equipment stays clean for the student athletes. Of course, we're going to be pushing personal hygiene. One big difference is, and we're going to get to this in a little bit, is the fact that locker rooms are going to be open for students who are in school after school, but lockers inside the locker rooms will not be used. Our athletes are going to have to bring with them every single day what they need for practice, and it needs to go home with them. So we know that eliminating locker use inside a locker room really helps contribute to the hygiene factor. And of course, the other part is hand sanitizer. Every coach is going to have, and I'm going to just pull up our next bullet, every coach is going to be provided with whatever PPE needs they may have. I have sitting in my office for every single coach, masks, gloves, and hand sanitizer and disinfectant. Every coach will receive these items. And anytime a coach needs more, the district has it. We're ready to provide for them. So we have plenty of PPE to make sure our student athletes are safe. And water, we are going to need you to bring your own water to practice. There is no sharing water bottles. We're not going to get into filling jugs and having, students be able to share filling their bottles from the jug out on the field. Okay, that's a practice that will not happen. I will tell you that even though the water fountains are not operational in our building, the bottle fillers are. So for our student athletes who are in-person instruction on a day of practice, they will have an opportunity to fill a water bottle before they head out to the field. So you want to have that water bottle. And of course, if you're coming from home, we want you to bring it with you. We will have backup. We are going to have cases of bottled water ready to go that student athletes can take if they simply get through all their water and need more, or they forgot that day. They were in school or they were rushing out the door. The last thing we would want to do is not provide for our students who need to be hydrated, but we're going to ask them to take on some of that responsibility and be ready to bring their bottle with them. And last but certainly not least, our IMPACT program, which is our concussion protocol program, that is still going to exist. That for our students who are either in 9th or 11th grade, or student athletes who are new to our district, they are going to have to take our baseline impact test, and that's still going to happen. We've already set a plan in motion to use some of our large instruction areas. For example, our cafeterias have a lot of desks that are spaced out that it can accommodate 30 students. We have our media center. We have a few spaces we can do this, and the great thing about impact testing is we can ask our student athletes to bring their Chromebook and do them on them. So we don't even need to get into going to a computer lab or sharing a device. Everybody can bring their Chromebook, and the people who need to get their baseline testing done this year can get it done on their Chromebook with our athletic trainer supervising the whole process, and it will be conducted as normal. So those protocols haven't changed, even though we're under some different regulations with athletics. And the last thing is we're going to be asking our Board of Education on Monday if they're willing to support us getting some extra staff here on campus that are simply going to help our student athletes who need it, help our coaches who need assistance, be able to help manage with spectators, and really just be able to implement, all of these new regulations that are not only required, but it's for the safety of our student athletes. So some positive case scenarios that I'd like to discuss tonight. First, let's talk about if we were to have a Shaker athlete that was to test positive. First and foremost, anytime we are dealing with a positive case, as you may have heard in many of the PAC meetings that Mr. Core hosted over the summer when we've talked about this subject, that how a positive case gets handled, how contact tracing occurs, who needs to quarantine, for how long and when. These are all decisions that come from the Albany County Department of Health. We will never tell a student athlete that they need to quarantine for a certain period of time. That is the decision that happens from the Albany County Department of Health. If we feel we have a situation that we're unsure of and that the Albany County Department of Health is still working on a timeline to contact people, we reserve the right to cancel a practice or a game if we feel investigation needs to take place. And if we need to do that, we will. But as far as individual athletes and decisions that get made regarding a positive test, that comes from the Department of Health. So if we had a Shaker athlete that did test positive, first and foremost, we would let the Department of Health know, and then they would let us know to what extent a team may have to be shut down. Now, this is what's real important, that we look at our teams as cohorts. So we have a girls soccer program that this fall we are offering a varsity and a JV team. we do not consider the girls soccer program a cohort. We consider the girls varsity soccer team a cohort and the girls JV soccer team a cohort. And we do not want to mix them. We are making one exception with mixing our athletes together, and that is during the tryout period. We understand that many sports need to look at all athletes for tryouts and then divide up into the teams that they're going to have for the season. Once the tryout period is done and the teams are established, very little to no movement is going to take place. And this is for safety purposes. So if we did have a positive case and we put the situation into the Albany County Department of Health's hands, we would hope that there'd be a better chance than not that maybe that team may not be playing as opposed to a whole program. Of course, we don't know that, but if we're cohorting and we're following all of our mask and social distancing rules, then limiting the spread and limiting the number of people who are affected, the chances of that increases. I'll say that again. If we maintain our teams and our cohorts, we practice social distancing, we wear our masks, the chances of the people who may have to quarantine or maybe a team needs to be shut down for a period of time, that gets limited if we stay within our cohort. Yes, that we as a team, as an athletic department, or as a league in the suburban council can do everything right. And there's always the chance that there can be a positive case and a team or teams could get shut down for a period of time. As many of you know, we cannot control what our students and our student athletes do, where they go when they are outside of the school day. And someone could contract COVID-19 in many different scenarios. And if that student athlete is positive or was around somebody who was positive and is a contact and has done everything right, that may possibly shut a team down if that's what the Department of Health deems necessary, even if the student athlete did everything right. So I bring that up because I know that we're going to work hard to do all the right things and follow all the proper protocols, but please know that just sometimes some things may be out of our control, even with doing everything right. And the Department of Health may need to shut a team or teams down if they feel that is the right thing to do. So if that were to happen and the team needed to shut down for, let's say, 2 weeks, if there's still season left, they could reconvene and continue the season from that point, pending those people were cleared and ready to go. If we were to have one of our opponents have a positive case, well, there's two scenarios here. It's an opponent that we've already played, and it's an opponent that we have yet to play. So let me talk about scenario one. If it's an opponent that we have already played that experiences a positive case, once again, we would be informed by the Department of Health. They would want to know who was on our team, who existed in that cohort. We would hand that information over to them. They would do their tracing and they would make the determination. So that determination would be out of our hands and we would follow the Department of Health protocols. If it is an opponent that we are going to see in the future, well, there's a chance that that contest now may not happen. It is possible that contests will get canceled this season based on either positive cases or in precautionary measures. Teams may shut down until the Department of Health has been able to investigate, and they may deem that a team is okay. But that process took 2 to 3 days. That can affect the contest. If we have a way to reschedule, we'll work hard to do so. But we want our families and players to be aware that that just may not be possible at times in the season. And we're just going to take it day by day, case by case, and game by game in that situation. And I'm sorry, as I mentioned already, the possible effects on scheduling could be various. It's always the goal to make up the game if it's possible. It just may not be in this case this year, especially with the season going later than normal and weather and daylight becoming a factor more so than ever in the fall season. I'd like to pass off our next slide back to Coach Sheeler.
Thank you very much. So a lot of this has been touched on, but I just want to go in a little bit more depth. And I want to talk about arriving to school for practice. The first thing is the locker room situation. We've spent a lot of time going through the school and all our facilities and making sure that each team has proper space to have after school. They'll be available for those students who are in person that day. Okay, so if a student is in school in the afternoon, right after school, they'll be able to go to the locker room. They'll be able to change and then head out to practice. Mr. Stein alluded to this earlier. Athletes coming from home should come to school dressed for practice and report to their practice site. And that means that they're prepared, not only dressed, but with water, any equipment they might need, everything they need from home is brought with them, and they head right to the practice site. The exception is the swim team, because they will be wearing bathing suits and having to change into that. That will be an exception. So they'll have access to a locker room. Also, this was mentioned, if an athlete didn't attend school that day, they have to fill out the attestation form. And that is something that our coaches will have be able to check and make sure that that's done and completed. And if not, then they will follow through and make sure that's completed by the athlete. As far as continuing on with locker room and bathroom use, we mentioned this. Each team will have a specific locker room with space, so coaches will be able to go in. There's going to be spaces on the ground that are properly distanced, so that we can keep them distanced even in the locker room. Bathrooms as well will be available close to their practice sites. That was a challenge. We will say that porta potties are no longer available. We can't use them. It's just not. It doesn't meet the guidelines we have from the Department of Health, so we're not able to use porta potties, but we will have access during practices. And it might not always be convenient, but we understand that as coaches, and we'll make sure that the athletes are able to use the bathroom when needed.
Coach Sheeler, I would just like to reinforce 2 points real quick. First and foremost, parents, our locker rooms have a set number that can be in them based on proper social distancing guidelines. And we will have coaches and adults who are in the hallway outside of our locker room, making sure that if the maximum number goes in, another person cannot enter until someone comes out. All right. That is extremely important. That is going to be monitored. And as Coach Sheeler mentioned, in our locker rooms, just like the kids have gotten and students have gotten used to around school, when there's dots spread out, that means that's where you're allowed to stand or sit and be spaced out safely. We don't plan on using or following any different types of guidelines in our locker rooms. They'll be marked out where kids can be distanced appropriately when using them. But there is a number that we will be adhering to. As far as our bathrooms go, all of our sports except for swimming are outside, and not being able to put porta potties out is a challenge. That was a convenience to our athletes that were in some of the farther reaches of campus, so to speak. We know that this is a challenge. So to that point, we will have adults who are going to help monitor and get students into the building in areas that are close to their practice field to use bathroom facilities when needed. And that process will be monitored, meaning our adults make sure they monitor who's going into the building, and then that person is coming back out. Because as many of you know, unfortunately, our high school is just not open after school like it is under typical times. Once dismissal is done, it is closed down for cleaning purposes to prepare for the next day, and that's critical. So the areas of the building that we are going to allow our students to use, meaning the pool, the locker rooms briefly after school, and then some bathrooms, are very limited spaces intentionally, so the building can be prepared the remainder of the building can be prepared for the next day for our students. So we are going to have ways to get our students for bathroom use in the building that as close to their field as possible. But again, it's going to be monitored by an adult. Coach Sheeler, did you want to add anything before I move on?
No, you nailed it. Thank you.
Okay. So transportation. First, that we know, and as many of you may know, if you have children that are riding to school, that a total of 22 passengers can be on a bus. That is including adults. So if we have teams that are larger than 22, and we have away matches, that could be a challenge that we're going to talk about. And to our next point, just like with the school day, parents are going to be encouraged to provide transportation to away contests and home from contests. That means if you would like to bring your child to the location of the away contest, meet the team there, and then bring them home, we are going to encourage that. Your coaches, your child's coach will have conversations with the team and with you about that to get a sense how many parents would like to take up that opportunity. And again, we encourage it. Not many of our teams in the fall will be larger than 22. Most of them are not. But if we do have some that we think we will have enough parents we can work with, where hopefully our transportation should not be an issue. Last, and this is very important, that transportation is not provided to students who are learning virtually that day. Practices will generally begin about 4:15. If you are an all virtual student or you are a hybrid student who is home learning virtually that day, you will need to get a ride to school for practice. Or if there is an away contest and you are home on virtual learning that day and you need to take the bus, you will need to get a ride to school to catch that bus. So please be aware that is part of the process with our virtual and hybrid learners, is getting a ride back onto campus for practice time. You will need to do that. Flexibility is the key. I know that if your child has been a hybrid student this week, they're going to tell you that flexibility is the word, that things change, things evolve, and that if we can't be flexible, it's going to be very easy for us to get upset in the times that we're in. So we're going to ask some of the same considerations from you. It's fluid, right? We know that going into this school year and looking at back to school, that day by day, things change as they come from our various state organizations. And we have to bend and we have to conform to those policies and do the best we can to keep our children safe. Athletics are going to be no different. Okay? This fall, there are a lot of people who are excited to get back to athletics, but it's going to really be the first foray for the public schools getting back into a physical setting such as athletics. Many of you know that athletics occurred in many different forms this summer. Whether it was youth, club teams, travel teams, it was happening. For many of our student athletes, this isn't going to be the first time back into an athletic setting for them, but it is going to be the first time in the public school setting. And as things occur across the state, the rules may change. We will do everything in our power to be flexible, to change with them, to meet the expectations set by the state, and to keep our student athletes safe. I ask that you be flexible and adapt with us. One of those is going to be rainy day procedures, something that we took for granted in the past. If it was a fall season and it was downpour outside, we would get the indoor practice schedule going and figure out first how our varsity teams can get a practice in, and we work way down. I think you need to be aware that a rainy day procedure in the times we're in may simply be that a practice or a game is canceled that day. Now, that being said, if we have a contest, meaning a boys or girls soccer contest or a field hockey contest, Walker Field will, or excuse me, that team will get priority on Walker Field to get the contest in if weather is an issue. Okay, the contest will always come first. And that's going to be for our J of those games on the turf that day, one after the other, and turn on the lights. Contests come first. Unfortunately, for our other sports that do not have the luxury of competing under the lights, a rainy day may simply be a cancellation that day. Okay, and I know that our coaches, they're not big on just canceling and letting everybody go home and kind of, relax and do nothing. Our coaches will have plans for what our athletes can do to engage in some type of activity that day, whether they get creative and remain outside in the inclement weather, or they have a plan for student athletes to go home and engage in some activity. So we want you to be aware of that. And I already mentioned this, I apologize. Games, practices, changes and cancellations will happen. We will always put our game cancellations right into Schedule Galaxy. So if you are one that subscribes to the app and you get alerts for your child's team, if we cancel a JV boys soccer game and a varsity boys soccer game, and you follow those two teams on the Schedule Galaxy app, you will get the alert that the game is canceled. And if we know when we're going to postpone it, you'll get the alert when the game is postponed as well. And for spectator guidelines, I'm going to hand it over to Coach Murray.
Thanks, Matt. Okay, a couple of things. So Suburban Council is definitely following the NISPA guidance, and specifically, there are only 2 spectators allowed per athlete. Now, this is actually only outdoors, and I'll get to swimming in a minute, but for all sports outdoors, if you're planning on attending your son or daughter's sport contest, you need to actually show up with a spectator badge. Those spectator badges, you can see actually the front and back of them below on the screen, and we're going to get a bunch printed up. We will give 2 to each athlete, and it doesn't have to be the same person who comes to each contest. You can use those where maybe they decide that they're going to have a game where they give the 2 spectator badges to their friends, other times to the parents. So that can vary, but it needs to be 2 spectators per athlete at a maximum. So you will get those passes in advance. They're going to be on a lanyard, and you need to wear them during attendance. I know Matt had alluded to the fact that we will have extra supervision at games, and they will be checking for badges. Parents from opposing teams are also going to have badges. So again, the same requirements throughout the Suburban Council. Unfortunately, specifically with swimming, we are not going to be able to have spectators this year. Some of the requirements that came down from both NISPA and the Department of Health require that the opposing team has to be on the opposite side of the pool. We obviously have to observe the 6-foot distance, social distancing between swimmers, and we actually just don't have enough space in our pool area, and that's the case with quite a few Suburban Council schools. So this is a rule that was created for the entire Suburban Council for swimming. Specific to spectators for tennis, the alleyway is going to be used for social distancing of players. And for that reason, people can come and they can watch tennis matches. They just can't be in the actual alley. So those are our basic guidelines. More specific guidelines have come out from NISPA that we will enforce. The other thing about the spectator badge is that there is a health attestation, and it is the exact questions that we ask our students every day when they come into school. And basically, when you're wearing that badge and you are coming to a contest, it asserts that you have answered no to all of those questions in order to be present. And that's just one more safety measure that we put in place so that our kids stay safe and healthy.
Ms. Murray, I just want to add one thing to that, right now, we're going to be discussing as a league tomorrow, but we may also be adding one more layer for spectators. We may be looking at some of our staff members that are at games for contact tracing purposes, taking names and phone numbers of the spectators that are present. I know this is something that a number of us in the past 6 months or so have experienced when they've, gone to an event or something where for contact tracing purposes, if there was a case, they know who was there. So that may be a practice that we're looking at doing for our contest across the league as well.
Thanks, Matt. So these are the references, and Matt will share this out in addition to the recording of this meeting. But these are references for fall athletics. We did follow the NISFA Return to Interscholastic Athletics Plan. It's about a 50-page document, and that's part of the reason that it took as long as it did to get here to this. And so we enforced those safety protocols. We also took a look at all the New York State Department of Health interim guide sports and recreation protocols, and absorb that into one comprehensive document for our North Colony Return to Fall Interscholastic Athletics Plan. The thing that we did differently with our plan is we basically took all the NISFA rules and regulations specific to COVID, Department of Health plans, and then we realized that at North Colony, we have some additional issues that we needed to make sure we took care of. Or Suburban Council, just as I mentioned in the previous screen, Suburban Council decided that spectators were not going to be allowed at swim meets. So for that reason, we needed to add a few addendums to the plan specific to our site and our particular needs. And lastly, I want to go to the Shaker Booster Club. And this is for your convenience. For anybody who has not been able to visit yet, this is brand new this year. It is our Shaker All Sport Booster Club website, bisonboosters.org, really easy to remember. And it is meant for family convenience. So if you went to the bisonboosters.org or accessing Family ID, just as convenient as our district website, we actually do have a link to the bisonboosters.org on our district website now. But if you look at that button in the green, the opening day practice schedule for parents, go ahead, click on that, check. You'll be able to access where and when your opening day practice is, because I know some parents have questions about that. And with everything coming out so quickly right now, I wanted one comprehensive spot where you're not sure where to go for Family ID, you can go to the athletic part of the North Colony website. You can go to bisonboosters.org. You can certainly go here for opening day practice.
I'm going to go back and show that real quick, Ms. Murray, on our athletics page right here. So this is the North Colony athletics page, and at the top of other is the link to our All Sports Boosters, where you just showed you before.
Thanks, Matt.
Yep. Anything else with that, Coach Murray?
I think that's it. Okay.
Last portion, as we mentioned, we had many questions that came in that we felt we were able to answer, in our presentation, but we did have a few that really didn't have a good landing spot throughout the presentation that we wanted to make sure we addressed, and we appreciate you sending in the questions. We had some good ones. So we want to know, could we please clarify what athletic opportunities 7th and 8th graders have for the fall and beyond? Can they play JV and varsity sports? Now, this is one that we did address, but we felt it was important to mention it again and repeat here. So right now, in the Suburban Council, there are no modified 9, and freshman offerings this fall. The only decision with that is for this fall. The only athletes that in 7th and 8th grade that can participate in JV or varsity athletics are the 7th graders who went through the APP process in fall of 2019 and played at the freshman, JV, or varsity level in a fall sport in 2019 and wish to continue in that fall sport as an 8th grader in fall of 2020. Will there be practice every day after school? And if yes, how will students on a virtual day get to practice? So there will be practice every day after school when possible. Again, I'm going to go back to that flexibility word, weather issues that may be going on where we just can't have practice that day. They may get canceled, but you need to count on every single day, Monday through Saturday, okay? JV and varsity sports generally Monday through Saturday. And if you are virtual that day, you will need a ride to your practice. When will we know information pertaining to the winter 2020 season? There's a bit we know. We know that the start date has been moved to November 30th. I believe the start date was going to be November 16th. So it did get pushed later. And all we know at this point is on the 30th, the hopes are the winter season can start as scheduled. But as we all can imagine, sitting here on September 16th, between now and November 30th, things can change drastically and decisions will get made at the state level as we get closer. And then, of course, we'll see how those decisions at the state level are impacted at the local level at Section 2 in the Suburban Council or here in the North Colony School District. And then last, because I know this is one that really has come in quite a bit, not just through questions, but word of mouth. Spring sports were canceled last year. Now it looks like the fall sport season 2 will be directly impacting spring sports again. What are we doing to ensure spring athletes get the attention they deserve? Why was the winter season not shortened to make space for fall season 2? These are great questions. I'm going to start with the last question first. The winter season already did get shortened by a bit, but the reality is that fall season 2 cannot occur earlier than March 1st. If we lived in a climate where fall season 2 could start in February, because we are talking about football outside and having fields and a place to go that isn't snow covered, then I think the state would have strongly considered fall season 2 happening earlier and shortening the winter season. But it's just not a reality in our climate. To ensure that spring athletes get the attention they deserve, I think NISFA has taken steps to try to do that. Fall season 2 is scheduled to end on April 30th. The spring season is scheduled to begin on April 19th. That's 11-day crossover. That right now is less than what many of our fall to winter athletes experience every single year. I think we can make it. I think we're going to be able to work with our student athletes to make sure that they get to experience both of those seasons successfully. And I will tell you that I know that our state organization is waiting to see what decisions may get made with Regents exams this year. If the decision is that there is not Regents exams in June, the spring season is, they're going to look to push that right through the end of June, right to June 30th, which I'll tell you that many of our spring coaches love the idea of starting later and ending June 30th, as opposed to starting contests on March 30th or April 1st. So those are all things yet to be determined. There's things that we're considering. And of course, the best interest of all of our athletes, regardless of season, is always at the forefront for us. So that being said, that concludes our presentation tonight. And I just wanted to wrap up by saying that we know that the look and feel of athletics this fall is going to be different. We know that there is a lot of health and safety guidelines that we need to follow that are going to make it feel a little bit different. We know that wearing a mask while playing a sport is going to be a challenge. We know that having less spectators and having to follow regulations is going to be a challenge. But I want all of you to know that even though these challenges are going to be great, that our coaches, our building administrators, and our student athletes are ready to meet the challenge. That we want to get kids on our fields, on our courts, playing, being active, supporting each other, and regardless of what the challenges may bring, they're ready for them. We've talked to the student athletes, we've talked to the coaches. They say, bring it on. We're good with it. Let's go. We just want to play. And it is going to be our job in the athletic office and our job as coaches to ensure that their safety is our priority. And that if we are to suffer any setbacks in a season, it's not going to be because we didn't practice the appropriate safety measures for our student athletes to play. We're excited. We look forward to the beginning of the season. I thank you for taking the time tonight. And last but certainly not least, if you have questions from tonight's presentation, as you can see on the screen, please email us at athletics@ncolony.org. Thank you very much for being with us tonight. I'm looking forward to seeing you out on our practice and game fields. Have a good night, everyone.
Okay.